Well, hello, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks for joining me today. I have a very special guest today, Monica Felton. She's a certified financial planner. She's a college financial planning expert. She's a fellow IBC practitioner and author, cash flow specialist. I'm trying to figure out what you can't do. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. And really, really awesome to have you here, Monica. And we're going to hone in today around the college financial planning world. That is her area of expertise. She knows it so well, and it's something that I know is on a lot of listeners' minds. Certainly, personally, it is. I got two kids, and one is close to getting into college, I think, maybe. But I know a lot of my listeners, I have young kids, and they're thinking about, saving for college. They want to do this and help their kids not have a massive debt burden as they leave college. They focus on education and wanting to give their kids a step up. But how do we do that and not sort of ruin our finances and our retirement? So this is where Monica is going to come in and share some tremendous wisdom. So Monica, thanks for joining us on this podcast today.
Absolutely. Tom, thank you so much for having me. I'm hugely passionate about college planning and helping parents with this exorbitant expense. It's just shocking. And every day I get phone calls or emails of parents of seniors that say, how on earth could they expect me to pay this? So it really is destroying financial lives of so many of middle Americans. So the ability to help and give hope and really offer a pathway forward for our most important asset, which is our children. It's quite a blessing that I get to do what I do.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so in this world, and we know college, it's evolved quite a bit, and we see, we live in the day we're recording this, inflation's crazy, right? Yeah. And in colleges, historically, and the numbers better than I do probably around this, is just way surpassing inflation. Right. Just normal inflation rates. And it's a big business, right?
Mm-hmm. And college is a big business, absolutely.
And we have to think about it. And so as we're thinking about investing, so before we get into details, tell us, how did you even get into, the focus of college planning? Yeah.
It's interesting. So 15 years ago, my first career I was a medical device rep. So I was in the medical world. And I was pretty unhappy, overworked, dismayed. And I had a very dear friend that said, Monica, I want to introduce you to something called the infinite banking concept. So this was maybe 18 years ago. So personally, I got involved with infinite banking. And then I quit my corporate world and I started my own practice about 15 years ago. And as I met with young, middle-class, successful, up-and-coming families, I would ask, what's that one thing that keeps you up at night financially? And they would say, college, how I'm going to pay for college. And 15 years ago, my girls were 4 and 5, right? So, they're in college now. But I was like, yeah, I think, wow, we better start thinking about college. So the more I got to understand college planning, the more I realized traditional financial planning does nothing to help families prepare for this enormous expense other than save more and then your money's gone. And so I thought, wait a minute, infinite banking is the way to pay for college while creating a future retirement. So that's kind of how I got into it. I love the community of people that I work with. Usually they're wonderful people who care about their children, who want the best, who are working hard, saving. They're doing all the right things. They're just doing what the government tells them to do, which you and I both know is not usually the right answer.
Yeah, it's usually the opposite, right? The fun plans they call all their projects, it's almost like the opposite, right?
I know.
Right.
Well, and I do remind parents, so you were talking about the inflation of college. And so if you remember back in the 70s, college was, very, very affordable. You could work as a waitress and go get your college degree. But in 1972, the government decided to get involved with college, and they provided a plan called Sallie Mae, which is the student loan program for college. Well, since the government's involvement, the cost of college has inflated 1,400%, 3 times the rate of inflation. And I say this all the time. I said, families, be suspicious when the government creates a plan to solve a problem that they created themselves. That's exactly what a 529 plan is, the high cost of college, right? Saving a 529. So the government's involvement is really what's destroyed, in my opinion, the affordability of college for the individual person.
Just and listen, in the surface, you always think, okay, yeah, let the government help support and provide some financing, but it's actually made the situation way worse, where all this sort of kind of quote unquote free money comes, and
that's right.
Now people are taking on massive debt, and at the time in their lives when they probably don't even truly understand the magnitude of this type of investment.
And they don't. And I meet with young people regularly that are in their 30s. They're just starting out their jobs. They have car debt, which you and I had too, right? When we graduated from college, we usually went out and bought a car. But on average, they have $20,000 to $50,000 of student loan debt. So plus a car payment, plus rent, plus all that. It's devastating. It's hard to move forward from that. And, a lot of times middle-class families, they want to help their kids, but they too are struggling with, inflationary pressures, debt that they have. So it's tricky. And that's why, I can't pound the drum enough about plan early. The time to start college planning was in the womb, and the next best time is today. So I don't care if you have a senior or a first grader, or you're even thinking about getting pregnant. Let's talk college planning, because it is the second largest expense that middle-class families will have behind their mortgage. But remember, we can't mortgage college. We don't get 30 years to pay that bill. We get 4 years.
Man. And so when you think about it, because I run across people where they're feeling they have to sacrifice their futures because they feel so compelled to provide for their children. And I said, you definitely have to think through this a bit, because, think about what the cost is today, and help the listeners really understand and appreciate, what does it really cost to fund college? I mean, it seems like you hear all these different numbers, but from the information you've seen, what does it realistically cost?
Oh my gosh. So we'll first start with what college costs today. So today, the expense of college for an in-state public 4-year college education is about $35,000 a year. So if you're looking to go out of state and maybe a smaller private school, now we're at about $55,000 a year. And if you have those Ivy League dreams, those very prestigious schools, Stanford, University of Pennsylvania, USC, Duke, something like that, they're almost $80,000 a year. College is 4 years, remember? So we got to multiply that number times 4. And what people don't realize is the expense of college and the cost of college are two different things. And let me give you an example. I had a family who called me. They took out a Parent Plus loan for $70,000 a year at 7.5% interest. Okay. So they're going to do that 4 times, right? So they're going to spend wait, did I do my math right? 7 times 4 is, $280,000, right? Did I do that right? Yeah. At 7.5%, right? Over 20 years, that's $2.6 million. So that's what that costs. So that's what I'm trying to help people understand, is it's not just what you're writing a check for. It's what that money could have earned you over 20 years. That's why college destroys retirement, because you won't have that money in retirement. Even if I'm just paying cash, let's do numbers differently. So let's say I'm paying $120,000 for a 4-year diploma, right? That's $120,000 I will not have in my retirement, right? Because I've given it to the college. So $120,000 at 5% interest is almost $300,000. So that's $300,000 I will not have in retirement because I chose to help my children with college. So I tell families all the time, whatever you choose to do for college, that's up to you, whether you want to pay, help your student with a community college, whether you want to just help with public school, private school, however much you determine as a family is up to you. But how you pay for that is so important because you can just write cash, right? Pay cash or spend down an asset like a 529 or a brokerage account, and you'll never enjoy the benefits of that money again. Or you can implement the infinite banking concept, which I'm sure all of your listeners are familiar with, right? And then we put that $120,000 in a properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance policy. There's so many benefits in the cash value. And then we borrow against that asset to pay for college. What that does is it allows our $120,000 to continue earning interest for the rest of our life, not to mention the benefits, the death benefit, just in case something happens, I still protect my family. And so this is what we teach people, to be different about where they save their money and how they pay for things because of inflation, because of risk in the stock market, because of taxation. The whole life insurance policy really puts all of that on the side burner, right? We don't have to worry about any of those things in a dividend paying whole life insurance policy.
In the financial world, I share this with folks all the time, and they say they're saving for their retirement or saving for college. Well, they're actually investing, right? And it comes with risk, and there's no level of certainty to know what that dollar will look like, say, when you need it for college. And to your point, I came across a couple of this recently who were just like, I didn't know you could actually lose money in my 529 plan.
Oh, yeah.
And so these are the common misunderstandings around it. And, to the point of, and I love the distinction you made around what you pay for it, like out of pocket, versus what the true cost of it over your lifetime. That's a massively different sort of number. And, I had someone who did do a great job. They saved like crazy. And then he said the most painful day is when I had to write the checks and basically extinguish an asset that I had been building up for 15, 20 years and no longer can see anymore.
That's right.
You just handed it off. And he realized it, like, oh my God, I didn't really, put two and two together until I had to start writing the checks. Right. And I was like, that's exactly the point. So yeah, definitely a big difference.
Yeah. And no one knows loss more than 2022, right? So remember, unfortunately, our attention spans for negative information is very short, right? So we forget that the stock market goes up. Well, we don't forget that. We like that the market goes up, but we forget that it does go down, that it does correct. And so many families invested in 529s now have 30% less wealth to pay for college. And if I have a senior, or I have a freshman in college, or I have a student in college, period, I don't have time to make that money back because you have to use that 529 money for college. They require you to spend it, or they charge you a 10% penalty when you withdraw the money. So it is an asset, a 529, that must be used for college, and it must be liquidated, even at the expense of a 10% penalty.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that because, you mentioned IBC is a way, because we talk about it to finance anything in life. So obviously,
without question,
college being a big expense we all face, especially when we have kids. But help me sort of compare contrast. Like, most people are familiar with the 529 plan or some other things like Covered Air, whatever. But can you help kind of share kind of the pros and cons of a 529 plan
sure.
comparison?
Sure. So remember, a 529 plan is a government savings program specific for college. So you make contributions into the 529 plan. The plan is invested in the stock market. So it is 100% at risk. So again, you can earn money, but you can also lose money. Now, the 529 is a visible asset. And this is important because when families are ready to go to college, there's financial aid that families have a potential to earn. And so they have to fill out a form called the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and you have to report your income and your assets. 529 is a visible asset on the FAFSA. So if you have money in your 529, it will reduce the amount of financial aid you can receive. So that's a bummer. The government tells you to save in a 529 so that they can give you less financial aid when the time comes to pay for college. So the number one, it's 100% at risk. Number two, it's a visible asset on the FAFSA. You must report it, and it will reduce your need-based financial aid. And then number three, the money must be used for college. So in the event that you have a student that wants to go to a trade school for $30,000 instead of a university for $125,000, you cannot use the 529. You can use the 529, but the government will charge you a 10% penalty because it's not a qualified college expense. So the government gets to determine how you use the money. There's rules and regulations and there's penalties involved if you don't do exactly what the government says. So that's a 529. And, it has been promoted since basically the 80s as the tool to use for college savings. But there are definitely some drawbacks.
Yeah, it kind of gets roped into to your point about the kind of government regulations and rules and complexities, and most people are familiar saying with like a 401k plan, IRA, like similar in nature. And it's like it just throws in tons of extra rules people have to adhere to.
Right.
And to me, it reduces the level of freedom and control use of our dollars, right? Because
without question. It's so ingrained in the culture, a 529 plan, just like saving in a 401k plan. I had a young man, bless his heart. I mean, he's saving. I love that he's saving. He's saving in a 529 plan for his future children. He doesn't even have a child yet. And I said, why are you doing that? And he said, because that's what they told me to do. So again, I love that people want to save and provide for their families and do the right things. But success is in the alternatives. When we're doing what everybody else is doing, in my opinion, traditional financial planning is failing. It is failing so many Americans because of fluctuation in the stock market, risk, taxation, inflation. And all these people are finding, wait a minute, this 401k plan that was supposed to be so great, there's not near the money in there that they thought. A 529 plan that the government told them to save, there's not near as much money in that. So we just have to ask more questions about what we're doing with our money. If everybody is telling you to do this, maybe we should say, what's going on here? I don't think a 529 plan is bad or a 401k plan is necessarily bad. I just think people don't understand completely how these programs work. And that's what we want, is financial literacy, to help people understand how do they work? What's the impact of these? What are the pros and cons? And there are pros, but there are certainly cons. So understanding the full picture.
Yeah, and that's really the biggest piece, because I know you're so heavily focused on educating, and for people who are looking to at least look into them and question it, right?
That's
Still
right.
might be right for them, but having the full pieces of information so you can make a much more educated decision on these things instead of just, like we say, follow the herd. There's a reason why these things get pushed and are promoted so heavily, and so you just have to understand if it's right for you. Because listen, we think about financial plans and we talk talk about all the time. There's a lot of numbers thrown into it. You're going to have this. If you save this, you're going to have this number. And it doesn't account for how many ththings can change in the course of that evolution in your life, right? Whether you're getting to school, like a client who, their son ended up getting a scholarship. And now they have all this money and they don't know what to do with it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And what a blessing. I mean, that's a wonderful thing, right? I mean, yay for the student, but now they have to pay 10% because their son is smart, or forgive me if a son or a daughter, but because their child was rewarded, right, with a scholarship, they get penalized because their money was in a 529. Like, what? That makes sense.
It doesn't make sense. Yes, absolutely. So you touched on a little bit too, because this comes up often a lot too, is the financial aid piece, right? Because people are thinking, maybe I can, try to get some aid that will kind of combat some of this overall cost, and people outside of scholarships, right? Like, what is the financial aid sort of arena look like, and what can people expect?
Yeah, no, what a great question. There is so much misinformation and downright lies about financial aid. It's heartbreaking. So first thing, there's two types of financial aid. There's need-based financial aid, which is based on mom and dad's economics. And then there's merit-based aid that's based on your student's academics. So for you to get a merit award, your student really has to be a scholar. I mean, they have to have a 4.0 GPA. They have to perform very well on the SAT or the ACT, like in the 1400s or in the 30s. Unfortunately, though, most financial aid is need-based. It's based on mom and dad's economics. So most families will say, oh, okay, well, I make $100,000. So how could, I'll definitely qualify for financial aid. Well, no. So the government expects families to pay. And so just quick, easy math, the government expects families to pay 20 to 30% of their gross income to educate one child. So if you make $100,000 and you have no assets, no 529s, they will say you can afford $20,000 after tax to educate one child. Now, if you make $200,000, they're going to expect you to pay about 30% of that number, or $60,000 a year per child. And there's no credit if you have multiple kids in college at the same time. So this is what I mean when I talk to families. I mean, again, they're working hard. They're doing all the right things. They make $150,000 to $200,000 a year, which in my opinion is a very great living. But now all of a sudden they're socked with, $30,000 after tax money to pay for school. That's a lot. So again, awareness is very key to a successful plan. And so the earlier families understand how much they're expected to pay, the better prepared they can be. Because what happens is your student does everything they possibly can to get the best grades possible. And they get into that reach school that you've been trying so hard. You've been encouraging them for 4 years. And then you find out you're going to have to pay $80,000 a year. And you have to say to your student, I can't afford that. It is devastating to families, and I see it all too often. So please understand what you're going to be expected to pay and start having those conversations early with your child so that you're not having these devastating conversations when they're going off their senior year, to college and yay, I got into USC. Wonderful. Well, USC is $86,000 a year today. So, I mean, it's like, whoa, what? I mean, that's crazy town. So
it just doesn't make sense. And that's what I've often heard too. Most people are, to your point, like they feel like they're barely getting by as is. And they're expecting this large assistance, but they're coming to grips with the reality that you just described is that money is not there.
No, it's not.
For need.
Now, I live in the state of Arizona, and I have spent 15 years working and partnering with my high school college counselors in the 9th grade. We do programs twice a year at all of our charter and private schools to help parents understand this cost in the 9th grade, right? Not their senior year, but in the 9th grade. And again, after 15 years, I'll tell you, parents don't believe me. They don't. They're like, it's not possible. And then they call me back when their kids are seniors and say, is there a mistake? There has to be a mistake. How can they expect me to pay this? I told you that 4 years ago. It's sickening. I mean, it's really a crisis that we have going on, not only for our parents, but think about how many students don't have parents' help. And the only way they can pay for college is student loans, private loans, and they're coming out of debt, $30,000, $40,000, $100,000 in debt. It's a crisis for sure.
Yeah, I kind of sometimes equate it to back in the day when they were just giving out money like crazy for mortgages for people that had no business getting these types of loans and nothing down, even though didn't have to look at their job, your W-2 incomes, nothing. It's just money flying through. It was just not it was just a disgrace to be able to get that kind of money and now it's like it backfired on people. Right. And I think in a lot of ways education can feel that way, right? Giving people debt that's going to hamstring them for decades to come.
Well, and remember, in the mortgage crisis, you could file bankruptcy and you could walk away from that debt. Not that that was the right thing to do, but you had that option. You cannot do that with student loan debt. There is no way to escape student loan debt. It follows you for life.
So with that, you touched on a few different areas, but maybe you can expand on this a little bit. So I'm looking at college as an investment. Right. And when people ask me all the time, okay, where should I invest? I said, what do you know and understand, right, to invest? And same with college, right? Some people, this maybe isn't the right avenue for them. Right. And making those decisions. But we're going to go with the assumption you made that decision that it is a good place for your son or daughter. Then, what are the things that people are typically getting wrong here? Obviously, one is not appreciating the full cost of it. What else are you seeing that people are repeatedly getting wrong as they sort of plan this out?
Well, after 15 years, what I would say is that college education for many is very important. If you're going into STEM, science, technology, engineering, or math, there is no other pathway. You do have to go through college. There are definitely some career paths where college is required. But I would also say that when you, outside of a lot of the STEM, when you start looking at what colleges students go to and future income, there are some exceptions, but the reality is finding a reasonable cost of college to complete your 4-year degree in a public school or something along those lines, the student does not receive a greater income 10 years, whether they spent $20,000 on college a year or, $350,000 on college a year. So to your point, let's do some research. What is it that you want your career path to look like? What are the future incomes that you're going to receive? And then back your way into what kind of college do you want to take care of? Because community college is the best value we have going on today. So you could go to a 2-year community college for almost free in most of the states in our union, and then spend the last 2 years at a 4-year college. That's certainly a way to reduce the cost. So there are ways to tackle it. Of course, your students can live at home. They don't have to live on campus. That reduces the cost as well. So again, I think it's more understanding what's the end game. Like, what is it that we really want out of this college education? And then we can back things out from there. And I think, again, having those conversations earlier will lead to the greatest amount of success for both the parents and the student. Because I laugh when I say this, but it's so true. I tell parents all the time, please prepare. because your kids are not going to care that you paid for college if you have to move in with them when you're 75 because you're out of money. They're going to be pissed. They're going to be angry that you didn't plan better. So there is a way to do all these things. It just requires time, energy, discipline, planning.
No, yeah. And it's so key to get ahead, just like, anything financially in our lives to kind of think through it and plan it out.
Right.
And
Right. For
anything
anything we do.
Yeah, it's all sort of part and parcel. You can't just do it in the last moment and hope for all the options to be available and be able to make all the best decisions.
Right.
It just doesn't happen in most scenarios. And it's interesting you kind of mentioned, and I really love how you frame that in terms of thinking about where you want to end up. And kids younger maybe don't know 100%. Right? That's part of the journey. But having a good idea will at least guide you. And I saw an article recently. It was the top 10 degrees people regret the most and the top 10 degrees that people don't regret the most.
Right.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And not surprising that some of them are on there.
And, people don't think about it, but psychology, history, not that those aren't, valuable, but the reality is, what is the employable skill that they're learning from those degrees that are costing $130,000? Now, unless you add a teaching credential onto that or something, employment's quite difficult. So I think we do need to work with our kids about, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? What does that career path look like? And our hope is that our college counselors are working with the students on that. But unfortunately, I don't think that's true. Certainly in our public schools, our college counselors are so burdened and overwhelmed with the issues that they have to deal with. College planning is not really at the top of their list, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it puts a burden, just like companies put the burden of retirement planning on employees.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like shifting over pensions to 401ks, like that. It's really our individual family responsibility to kind of tackle these things. Right.
Because, and I can tell you, as I just sent my youngest daughter off to college this year. It's really such an exciting time. I mean, it's for them, for my daughter, for my husband and I. There's all these emotions that go with it when you send your baby off to college. But knowing that we had this planned financially and that we weren't shocked and that wasn't, you're still shocked. There's no amount of preparing that can help you to say, you want me to pay what for college? And she's getting how or no financial aid. So those things are shocking. I'm not going to lie. But it is such a beautiful time to have prepared for that and be able to send her off on her way. I love that I'm able to help families prepare for this because it is positive. It is exciting. As long as you prepare and you plan. Unfortunately, we have so many families that just put their head in the sand and they don't want to think about the cost. But it is coming. It is real. And the finances, even if it's not number one or number two, it is a part of where your student goes to college. I can't emphasize this enough. So having these discussions early on, believing the information that you are expected to pay, and then starting to plan for it, it really just makes that college experience for not only the parents, but also your students really quite wonderful. So again, I know I'm on on my soapbox, but it's so important to plan early, and hope is not a financial strategy.
Absolutely not. So Monica, this has been a wealth of information and to listeners who are listening to this and try to planning for their kids' college. This is the time to sort of, even wherever they are in their journey and thinking through it, is to plan, to get your head around the options and meet with experts like Monica and others who are helping really guide people so you can, make the most efficient use of your wealth, right? To support the things you want in life. That's really what we're trying to help educate people on, right? This is all the great work Monica does and I do and at Cranial Pride, is to open up people's eyes to how to get the most out of our wealth, right? And make
For
the
sure.
impact that we want. So, Monica, any last parting shots, any things you want to leave our listeners with here?
No, again, Tom, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. Again, you mentioned this earlier. I'm really an educator. My goal is to help people understand the process. Families will go through college planning once, twice, maybe 4 times, depending on how many kids you have. I do college planning about 10 times a week. So I really do have a lot of information. Information is power. And, it helps families to prepare so that this can be such an exciting time and not a devastating time. So, my website is monicafelton.com. So please head over. I have tons of information there. I have a YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and it's Monica Felton CFP. So if there's anything I can do to help you with this very specific, exciting time, I'd love the opportunity to help.
Awesome. That's wonderful. We'll definitely put that information in the show notes, and hopefully people go out and reach out to you and get some tremendous education. So Monica, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and sharing your wisdom. And hopefully we'll get to chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.